Go ahead.
Welcome into Inside Press Box. I'm Stan the Fan Charles, and joining me on this program this week is Childs Walker of the Baltimore Sun, and we appreciate his joining us. Childs, I've known you for probably a dozen years, and you and I actually have probably only said a few words to each other over 12 years, but I've always liked your work and really appreciate your insights into all the world of sports. And I got to tell you, one of the things I most respect about you and also Ed Lee over at the Sun, they could ask you to do a fire story tomorrow, and you are one of the most versatile writers on the face of the earth.
Well, thank you, Stan. You're right. I've done a little bit of everything over the years. I've been in the Sun for 24 years now, and
Is it 24 years? God.
24 years. I know it's wild, and I've written about everything that you can write. And I don't know if we've ever talked about this, but I used to listen to you in my bedroom when
That just means I'm old,
yeah,
Charles.
well, we live. I'm not even young anymore, right? But yeah,
Yeah.
as a kid, when we lived down in Otterbound, I would listen to you after those games at night. So I
One
go
of the
right back with you.
one of my funny stories is Greg Bader once told me that all those young employees at the Orioles 30, 35 years ago used to listen to me, and one of them was a guy named Theo Epstein used to
Yeah.
listen to me. So,
Well, Greg and I went to high school together, so that fits. We're
all right.
contemporaries.
Hey, wanted to talk Ravens with you, obviously, with the
Yep.
timing of the game coming up Sunday at 6:30 on CBS. But rather than hit the splashy stuff, one of the real stories, and I won't say it's off the radar or low key, has been the passing of Joe D'Alessandris, the O-line coach, and how quickly they kind of reconfigured that and brought in George Warhop. And talk a little bit about what that's been like, because I think that's one of the real key stories of the Ravens' second half surge.
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, obviously Jody's passing. I mean, it was a deeply sad and potentially unsettling thing for everyone who had been around him for years. I
Yeah.
mean, he was a big part of the organization. A trusted coach. I mean, a lot of the offensive linemen on the team have really developed under his watch. So I mean, it was and the Ravens were in every way planning for him to be the guy to guide the offensive line this year and help. I mean, you remember going into the year, that was maybe the biggest question mark on the team. I mean, they were major overall. They said goodbye to two of their most experienced linemen, two of their starters after last season, and they really went with a youth approach. I mean, where they were going to be.
And let me just
Yeah,
interrupt you.
yeah.
Don't you feel that they went with that youth approach because they thought that Joe D could coach these guys up?
I do think that was a big part of the calculation. Absolutely. They trusted in his developmental, skills, and part of it too was budgetary. I mean, they have to make some business decisions with Lamar's contract on the books. So I mean
Yeah.
that factors into it. But certainly having faith in their coaching was part of the strategy to do that aggressive overhaul of that unit. So you had a rookie in Roger Rosengarten coming in as the potential starting right tackle. You had wide open battles at the guard spots. Daniel Falele switching positions where he was gonna, not only was he still a developmental prospect even at tackle, but he was gonna have to learn a whole new position at guard. All of that was going to be under Jody's charge. So I mean, they really had to audible quickly when he got sick. And certainly the hope at the time was that he would get well and he would be back at some point. But they did go out and get an experienced coach in George Warhop, somebody they knew could step in right away and handle that unit for as long as it needed to be handled. And a guy who John Harbaugh has said several times, wasn't like he and George Warhop had a deep relationship going back. I mean, they it's not like George Warhop had worked for him elsewhere,
Yeah.
but he knew him by reputation, and he trusted that he would be a steady hand coming in with those young guys that we just talked about. And man, I think it's worked out better than anyone could have expected, based on where we were at the beginning of the season. I mean, we thought this might be the thing that held the Ravens back, that kept them from being in the position where they are right now, or a genuine Super Bowl contender. And it really hasn't. I mean, Roger Rosengarten he's a rookie starting tackle, and man, I think he's not just been a good rookie. I think he's just been a good player over the second
Yeah.
half of the season. People were really worried about Falele. How would his how would his athletic attributes line up with guard? I think again that's it's really not been nearly as big an issue as people thought it was going to be. He's now feels like somebody who could be a solid NFL starter. So I think that whole group, and then I mean, we've always known Patrick McCary is a guy who can
Sure.
sort of slot in wherever they need him. And that was a guard this year, which is not a position that's a position he played the least coming into this year. And he's sort of done the good professional job that you would expect. But I mean, that unit was, as we said, probably the biggest source of uncertainty going into the season. And with George Warhop's guidance, has really not been a negative issue for this team, hardly at all.
The defensive side of the football, it was not a pretty sight early in the season, with Zach Orr taking over as a first-time coordinator. But and I've talked to others about this. Do you feel that the bringing in of Dean Pease, was that, from your assessment, Childs, and we're talking with Childs Walker, the Baltimore Sun, was that a mutual decision by Zach Orr and John Harbaugh, or did Zach go to Harbaugh, or did Harbaugh go to him? How did that come about?
They certainly presented it as a mutual decision, and I've not heard otherwise. I mean,
Yeah,
Zach. I mean, Dean was a guy that Zach already trusted and was already reaching out to for counsel and just sort
yeah,
of bouncing things off of him. So, in some sense, it was formalizing something that was already happening. Um, but it certainly did raise questions given the timing of when it happened. I mean, as you said, things were not going well at the time that they brought Dean in. So, I mean, it was natural for people from the outside to say, "Oh God, they're worried about Zach Orr." They've
yeah,
brought in somebody that they know because they don't know that the guy they put in the spot is ready for it. I don't think that that's ended up being the case. I mean, Dean has certainly been around for the whole year, and I mean, you can maybe see his fingerprints on some of the ways that they're playing defense, but that hasn't, to me, diminished Zach Orr's role in the
right.
turnaround at all. I mean, he's been front and center. I mean, his communication with players, which I think they always viewed as a likely strength for him, given how recently he was, a big part of the team on the field. I think that did play a big part in how they were able to transform things. I mean, they've often pointed back to that week after the second Bengals game where they won, but they gave up a whole lot of points.
Yep,
Zach Orr referred to it as really a crushing disappointment the way that they played that night. That was week 10.
yep,
They had a sort of everything on the table meeting of the whole defense right after that, and a sort of a different culture of accountability set in after that. And some of that we saw in the personnel changes. The most obvious one being they pull Marcus Williams from the lineup and put Ardarius Washington in at safety as a starting safety, and that's been a huge success. I think a bigger success than any of us could have envisioned coming into the season. Also, moving Kyle Hamilton back off the line of scrimmage; those were big tactical choices. But I think Zach Orr's ability to communicate with the players and sort of, you know, get them on board with the plan, and have the leaders of the defense consistently stand behind him even when things weren't going well, has ultimately really been a testament to him that he's a young guy, but he was ready to step in and go through some difficult times and come out the other side.
yeah. I just think Dean Pease helped him a little bit,
Yeah,
probably steadied him a little bit, and
and I
just
think
said, "Hey,
Zach would say that as well,
yeah,
without it being an undermining thing.
yeah." On the offensive side of the ball, Todd Monken, his second year there, how do you view the relationship between him and Lamar? It really seems to be that they are simpatico.
Yeah, I mean, he he has made a point really since he came in of saying that this needs to be Lamar's offense. I mean,
Yeah,
he needs to have a greater handle on everything that's going on. He needs to be the guy who is the main decision maker on the field, the center of everything. We're gonna put more on his plate, and we trust him to flourish with more on his plate, and that's really been the case. And we've seen it more this year even than we did last year. I mean, obviously he won the MVP last year, and they were the best team in the AFC until the championship game. So,
yeah,
so it worked very well. But I mean, their offense has clearly taken another step forward this year. I mean, they're the most dynamic offense in the NFL. By some metrics, one of the most dynamic offenses of the last 50 years. And I mean, we've never seen Lamar throw the ball better. We've never seen him make more decisions at the line of scrimmage. I don't think we've ever seen everybody on the offense have more faith in him as the guy. And might that have happened anyway? Sure, but Todd Monken certainly made a point of having him be in that position, and it has worked smashingly well.
Do you feel that he is now almost bulletproof from having happened to him what's happened to him? And I hate to almost ask that and put it out in the stratosphere for fear of jinxing him, but he looks like he is playing with more confidence. As great as he's been to win 2 MVPs and the astounding win-loss record in the regular season, it's just his confidence level now, to me, is off the charts.
Yeah, he did not seem the least bit tight going into that Pittsburgh game on
Yep.
Saturday, which he certainly could have been. I mean, he obviously, I mean, I think it helped that they won that game, 3 weeks earlier, and they played well in that game, and he played well in that game. But look, Pittsburgh was still a team that had given him trouble over the years, and I mean, if his playoff pass was somehow in his head, I mean, he certainly could have gone into that game tight, and we didn't see that at all. I mean, you sort of saw him hopping. I mean, I don't know if you watched the Hard Knocks episode last night, but you sort of saw him like
No, I did
dancing
not.
around
Yeah.
in the pregame and saying, this is what we've been waiting for all season. This is where we want it to be. So, yeah, there's no sense right now that he's haunted by ghosts of playoff past. I mean, you know, that narrative will come right back if he goes out and doesn't play up to his level on Sunday. I mean, this is a huge game. It's a game on which he's going to be judged, especially given the quarterback on the other side of the field. But every signal that we've gotten is that he's sort of a fully realized player at this point.
Charles, I'm not the biggest John Harbaugh fan in the world. I was ready to move on from John about 6 or 7 years ago, and have steadfastly been critical of, like, it seems like if I'm sitting at home watching a game and there's choice A and choice B, he takes A and I'm on B, and I'm like scratching my head. Why didn't he see it the way I saw it? But I have to admit, this year, I think it's one of his really elite coaching jobs this year.
I just think that, and there are a lot of people who feel the same way that you do. I hear
Yeah.
from people every week who,
Yep.
don't agree with him tactically, certainly don't think he's a great game coach. I guess my response to that has always been, and I'm probably a little bit more on the pro Harbaugh side, is just that I've never seen him lose a team. I
His
always feel
teams,
like,
that one of the things I've always given him credit for, his teams show up. They
right,
they are very rarely not not into the game.
right. And one way or another, whatever the composition of the team is, he retains their attention and he has them. They generally improve over the course of the season. I mean, the playoffs is a little bit of a different issue. I mean, we
Yeah.
know they've come out flat in some playoff games, but broadly speaking, they solve problems over the course of a season, as we've seen them do this year with the defense. They figured out the offensive line. We already talked about that stuff, and I do think you have to give him credit for being the guy at the top of the operation that sort of figures
That
these
keeps
things
it
out.
all that keeps it all together.
I mean, I
Yeah.
think he's a very good big picture coach. And we see again and again, especially at this time of year when, teams are firing coaches and looking for their next coaches, there aren't that many guys who are as good at those things as he is.
Yeah.
Even though he has his flaws and they're open for criticism, and
Yep.
he may well make some choices in the game on Sunday that will leave him open to criticism again. I still just don't think there's that many guys that you want more than him at the top of an organization over a long period of time.
Let me just do a quick spot for our friends at the Costas Inn. Some exciting news out of the folks at the Costas Inn. It won't really take place for a couple months, but the OTB at Timonium, the food concession now, is going to be the Costas Inn starting in late March, early April. So they will have everything there on the menu except steamed crabs. Check for more details at costasin.com. And Costas Inn has been at the location 54 years, North Point Boulevard, 4100. Great steamed crabs, fantastic crab cakes, fantastic crab soup, and nightly specials on the menu. The Costas Inn. They've been friends of mine for close to 40 years now. Fantastic people, family atmosphere. The Costas Inn with that exciting news that they're taking over the food concession come late March, early April at Timonium's OTB. That's the Costas Inn. We're back with our remaining few minutes with Childs Walker. Childs, one of the players on the offensive side of the ball, and I'm assuming we're talking on Wednesday evening. I'm assuming Zay Flowers is a no-go for this week. Are you assuming the same?
That would be my strong thought. Yes. I mean,
All right.
I think there's maybe an outside possibility, but yes, I'm proceeding on that assumption. Yeah.
Okay. But one of the players that really has stepped up has been Rashad Bateman. He has really kind of he fit into that mold of Ravens receiver for about 5 years where he didn't accomplish much, partly due to injury, partly due to disappearing. But this year he has really showed up.
And he knew this was a huge year for him in terms
Yeah.
of, you know, what kind of career was he going to have in the NFL? Did he have a path forward to becoming the player that we knew that he had? I mean, the thing with Rashad Bateman that I've always said to people is I don't think you can question the talent, and I think we saw glimpses of that from
Yeah.
in his rookie year. I mean, at his best, I mean, there have been other Ravens receivers who were drafted high where you just watched them for a couple of years and you said
Like Travis Taylor. Yeah.
he's just not as good as we
yeah.
thought he was.
Yeah.
I would not say that about Rashad Bateman in terms of, the skills that we see. I mean, the route running, some of the contested catches. I mean, he can be a really dynamic downfield threat. And also we've seen this year terrific in the red zone because he is really a precise route runner as well. John Harbaugh talked about that today. But this did have the feel of a bit of make or break year for him. And you also heard it in, the comments of kind of the team decision makers going into the year. They were trying to sort of pump him up and, say, we expect this to be a huge year from him. You heard from Lamar. I mean, there was a lot of question about their chemistry. Something we talked again and again where, last year Bateman would get open and Lamar would not seem to throw him the ball, but Lamar was always adamant that I know the talent he has. We've got to have him be a bigger part of the offense. And we have seen that come to fruition this year. And to his credit, he's been on the field. He's been reliable health-wise, which is a big deal for him. You mentioned the injuries. But he's done it, and he's done it at times when they've needed him to step up. I mean, the Zay Flowers injury is a big deal. I mean, that's one of their best playmakers. But we saw Rashad Bateman, he caught another touchdown pass in the Pittsburgh game, and and I thought it spoke to his chemistry with Lamar because Lamar had to fit the pass between two defenders, and they really had to nail the timing of it, and they did. And that speaks to two guys who were in sync. And I think there's a feeling that right now, would they be a better offense with Zay Flowers on the field? Sure. But Rashad Bateman can handle the greater responsibility along with guys like Isaiah Likely, who, even though he's a tight end, I mean, he can be a really dynamic pass catcher. They just have so many guys. But this has been a transformational year for Bateman in terms of, I would say, his trajectory in the league.
Two more questions for you before we let you go. Talking with Childs Walker of the Baltimore Sun. Childs, Kyle Hamilton, you've been around the game for a while now. As you say, you've been covering the team for close to 20 years, I guess. He is a truly unique talent. Could you talk a little bit about him and his talent?
Yeah, man, he is really, really good. I think what's been so cool this year is that he has played at just as high a level as he did last year in a different role.
Totally different.
I mean, last year, he was this incredible Swiss Army knife near the line of scrimmage. I mean, he'd rush the passer on one down. He'd nail a running back on the next down. He'd be covering a tight end on the one after that. I mean, there was no safety like him, right? This year they're having all these problems on the back end. It seems like, that's going to be the thing that holds them back. They can't hold a lead. There's constantly explosive plays going over their heads. So they say, well, Kyle Hamilton is our best defensive player. We're going to pull him off the line of scrimmage. We're going to make him the key to the communications on the back end. he slides right into that role, things immediately get better, right? I mean, he's just, to me, he could be the next guy that we talk about as a sort of foundational
Yeah,
guy in Ravens history. I mean, in that line of Ray Lewis and Ed Reed, I mean, a very short list of names that we talk about, that sort of bind together the history of this franchise. He could be one of those guys, and it's not just on the field. I mean, he's just an impressive guy in every respect possible. In the locker room, the way he interacts with his teammates, the way he talks to us in the media. I mean, he's a face of the franchise kind of person.
he's a special, special guy. I got one more personnel question, and then I want to ask you how you think this game will go, and then we'll let you get out of here. Derrick Henry. I know people are listening to this or watching it and saying, how come you haven't mentioned Derrick Henry yet? What is his presence kind of allowed Lamar to do? I mean, it's got to be such a big help to Lamar having him.
I think it's just the way they've elevated each other. I mean, you could kind of imagine it being this way coming in, but remember there were still plenty of questions about Derrick Henry coming into this year. I mean, it's not a position where guys tend to age all that well. He came in with a lot of seemingly a lot of tread off the tires, right?
Yeah,
But I mean, I think one thing just seeing him up close over this many months now. I mean, he is just a he is a remarkable athlete. I mean, that you just don't see that often. I mean, just size, strength, speed perspective, but the fact that, I mean, he has been in the league so long. He's 31 years old. He has all those carries. You would never know that from watching him in
no.
in in
His
a practice.
legs are fresh. His legs are
He
fresh.
he moves like a guy who's 21 instead of 31. I mean, he's just it's a remarkable thing to watch. But in terms of his interplay with Lamar, I mean, it's two top tier Hall of Fame talents suddenly put together, and they just play off of each other beautifully. I mean, you know, uh,
And
Lamar creates
they enjoy playing with each other.
they do, and you've seen it in the locker room. In I think recent months, you've seen them get closer and closer. You see them together all the time now. They understand how important they are to one another. Um, but obviously Lamar creates more space for Derrick Henry. He's not getting hit as quickly. And then conversely, I mean, Todd Monken used a funny phrase to talk about it the other week. He said being able to hand off the ball to Derrick Henry, it's like a smoke break for the quarterback. He said that it's just such a comfortable feeling to say, I don't have to do everything.
Yeah, yeah,
I can hand the ball to this guy 25 times and wonderful things are going to happen. And
right.
especially, God, you're going to Buffalo. It's going to be 17 degrees at kickoff or whatever. And you got this 247-pound guy who's just going to be ramming into the defense again and again. And he's going to break one eventually. And God, it's what Monken said. It's got to be just a tremendous feeling to hand the ball to that guy.
Where do you side on the MVP ballot? I mean, are you a Lamar guy?
Yeah, I would have voted for Lamar.
Yeah.
I certainly don't think that Josh Allen is a bad choice. I mean,
No, but I think Lamar
think
is, yeah,
I mean they're they're remarkable in a lot of the same ways. I mean, they don't do it aesthetically exactly the same way, but
yeah,
in terms of their impact on the team, it's really very similar. So when people say, "Oh, well, it's the most valuable player," it's not the stats. Well, I mean, how can you argue either of those guys is not
right.
as valuable to their team as any player in the league? I mean,
Agreed.
they obviously are, and Lamar's numbers are a little bit better. Whether you look at the advanced metrics or the traditional stats or what have you. I mean, he just has the slightest edge, and I think the Ravens offense is a little more dynamic than the Bills offense. So I would lean Lamar, but I wouldn't yell at anybody who
Yeah.
says Josh Allen.
So the game, 6:30 Sunday, you'll be there, correct?
I actually won't. I'll be in Baltimore.
You'll be in
Yeah,
Baltimore. Okay.
I'll be in
You
Baltimore.
you got sense, you got good sense because it's
Yeah.
going to be bitter cold there. How do you think this game goes, Cal? Ravens are a point and a half favorite.
Yeah, I picked the Ravens for the paper. I picked them by a touchdown. I think I do think they're very evenly matched teams. I think they're more evenly matched than the week 4 score, the 35-10 score would
Sure.
suggest. The Bills were missing some key guys on defense in that game. I don't think the Ravens will be able to control Josh Allen as much as they did in that game. I mean, they really did neutralize him in that game to a degree that no one else did this season. Um, But I just think, especially, given the weather conditions that we talked about, I think the Ravens are going to be able to inflict their offense on the Bills a little bit better than the Bills will be able to inflict their offense on the Ravens, as I guess how I would put it. But I think it's going to be really big who gets on the board first. I think if one of the two teams builds a 2-score lead in the first half, that could be a huge deal, because then you're probably taking some of the opponent's balance away. So I think that's going to be big. I just think the Ravens have a little more oomph on offense.
All right. And the last thing, I know I said this before, but promise this is the last thing. Is the angst over Justin Tucker, is it over for now, you think? Or do you think that deep down that could impact decisions in the game?
I don't know that that would impact decisions in the game. I think that they'll probably be fairly conservative in terms of what kind of field goals they attempt in the game, regardless, just because of the weather conditions
Yeah.
and the nature of that stadium. I mean, if you remember, he missed 2 field goals in the game that they lost, the elimination game they lost in Buffalo 4 years ago.
Yeah.
And that was a wasn't as cold, but it was a windy night. And so I don't think you'll be seeing them, attempt 58-yard field goals anyway. Um, I I do think he has answered a lot of questions over the last month. Not only has he not missed a kick since the bye, he's just looked better doing it. I
Yeah.
mean, the kicks have been right down the middle again. On the other hand, he hasn't really had to attempt
All that many.
really
Yeah.
gut-wrenching clutch kick in
Yeah.
any of these last 5 games. So if that does come up on Sunday night, it is something everybody's going to wonder. I mean, until he does it. So I wouldn't say it's completely gone as an issue, but I would say he's done a lot to answer it since the bye.
Charles Walker of the Baltimore Sun, thank you very much. Really appreciate the time.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Stan.
All right. That's going to do it. We thank our friends at the Costas Inn for bringing you this podcast. I'll be back with you next week with another one. Take care for now. Bye.